People. Hey, Jen.
Hi,
Hey, good to see you.
good to see you.
Welcome to everybody. All right.
Hello.
Hello. Well, I've got a few slides to share with you, but mostly I just want to welcome you. And I'm really curious what brought you here today. Just give me some context about maybe who and where you are and what intrigues you about this work and how I might make the best use of our time.
I'm Diego. I'm based in Milan.
From Milan.
Let's call it Italy, but I'm actually much closer to the Swiss border than to Rome. Although I'm originally from Florence. I'm here because I ran into your book last year when I was still living in China, and I'm interested in knowing more about the course. I am a graduate from another school, more on the pure coaching side of things. But I am, as of now, NACC certified.
Okay.
But I'm not a full-time coach. I'm
Okay.
actually more financial advisor for renewable energy.
Okay. And who else would like to share?
Hi, David. I'm Ruth.
Yes.
I work in the education department of a UK university. I'm drawn towards narrative coaching because I'm a storyteller as a teacher. I like to think of myself as being a very nurturing professional. And a lot of what I do is help my students to ditch negative narrative stories of self in favour of a more positive ownership of the story going forward.
Excellent. Yeah,
Hi,
Chris.
David.
Oh, just one second, Chris, and I'll come back to you, Robin, just a second. So, Chris, if you'd go ahead.
Sure. Chris Roberts coming in from San Francisco.
Mhm.
I do a lot of executive coaching. My theoretical background is adult development theory.
Okay.
And I think, for one, I'm just your typical coach that's addicted to personal and professional development.
Okay.
And two, I think who said that? Yeah, kind of like what you're saying, Ruth. I think so much of adult development is about letting go of one story and crafting a new story. And
Mhm.
so I think when I was reading about narrative coaching, that just it connected. And so you captured my curiosity.
Okay. Well, and identity is very much at the heart of this work. So I find that a lot of coaching is so obsessed with behaviors, but we just tend to behave in ways that allow us to remain consistent with how we see ourselves. And
Right.
so if we want to start, it's like if you want to start a new story or a new way of living, we've got to have a different sense of self and a belief that that part of ourself could actually do this. It's also why we don't set goals very often either. So, but Robin, go ahead. You were going to say something.
Yeah, I'm from South Africa.
Okay.
I read your book.
Okay.
I'm a trained integral coach,
Okay.
and I'm really quite interested in your approach.
Okay. Great. Lawrence.
Hi, David. Hi. Yes, so I did my ICF coach training a few years ago, and I'd been training for a while. And basically, I'm really interested in your approach because some of my best coaching sessions, more life coaching, are when I just show up empty compared to following ICF competency model, which I do use when doing more structured one-off executive coaching.
Sure. Okay. Great. Jen.
Yes. Hi.
We're friends now. Jen's been in a class, a colleague of mine I've been running all year, and so it's been fun to meet you. So
yeah.
What brings you here?
Well, that is sort of what brings me here. I got a little bit of a flavor of your style and a little bit of narrative coaching through that other program. And so on the one hand, I'm intrigued to learn more. And that program came to an end and I just kind of missed the environment. And I thought this might be an interesting way to kind of continue that practice. So I'm a leadership development and executive coach, and I'm in Kansas.
Okay. If someone else would like to share, Elisa.
Yeah. good morning, and apologies for being off mute. You can
That's
hear
okay.
the life happening in the background. Yeah, so it's interesting. I first discovered you, I think, through Coaches Rising. So you did a module for that. I don't remember the title, but it was a leadership course.
Yeah.
And I was really intrigued by a couple of things. One is the degree to which you didn't have to translate your model or theory or approach or language, because you were pulling out what was essential and inherent to the client, which really resonated with me. And I love this idea of metaphor and images. And I find myself being able to apply that in some coaching contexts and some not. And I'm really curious how I can attune maybe in a different way so that I'm able to pick up on or test out images and metaphors more regularly, because I see the power of it. And I think somebody mentioned identity, like it's a way to create some space so we can look at ourselves in a new and perhaps less ego-threatening way. So that's what brings me here. And I'm in Charleston, South Carolina.
Okay, great. Anybody else care to check in?
So this is Ross Martin.
Hello, Ross.
Glad you can hear me. I'm not sure. My computer says that my video is on, but it clearly isn't. Anyway, so I've been coaching for 25 years, and it's my second career. And I've been trained in lots of different coaching modalities. I originally got trained by CTI. And just before this session, I watched David, the sample session, the sample coaching session that you sent out. So, so I'm kind of curious. So I am curious, and after watching that coaching session, you know, I'm left thinking to myself, this is so dramatically different than my practice has been. You know, so I'm intrigued by that, and at the same time, I say to myself, "Wow."
What was I thinking?
That's kind of where I am this morning.
Okay, it's fair enough. Fair enough. Just a quick response to part of that. So I've been working on this huge research project, sort of in conjunction with the Institute of Coaching at Harvard, trying to help us move beyond competency models for coaching, and particularly to focus more on maturity, which I find as you get more advanced in coaching is far more important than memorizing lots of tools and techniques. But as part of that, you know, there's longstanding research in psychotherapy that the coach themselves, and particularly the coach's methodology, have almost zero impact on outcomes. That most any credible coaching methodology done really well will achieve good outcomes, but it's a function of actually far more important things. And the primary factor by far, more than all the rest put together by far, is the client and the factors in the client's life. And yet we don't talk really about clients in that way. And so for me, part of what makes this profoundly different, Ross, to your point about how most coaches were trained, is that our entire purpose is to elevate our client. Because, and I find that particularly true now, when most of us are to varying degrees dysregulated much of the time, have more stress than we might want in our life much of the time. We worry about the world more than we would have, say, 5 years ago. And so it doesn't really matter at the end how fabulous your coaching session was if the client is unable to do anything with it when they leave. And the vast majority of what they're going to accomplish through coaching is not what you do in the sessions, it's what they do between them. And so for me, a lot of this work is really even further decentering ourselves as a coach sort of recognize, what is this human being ready for right now? What is this one next step in their journey, and how might I help them? And I find that for me, it just takes us away from obsessing about ourselves and how well we're coaching. So it is what you'll find though, Ross, it kind of comes full circle, that it is a bit contrarian to how most people were trained. But when you sort of kind of allow yourself to move into that space, it actually starts to feel quite natural. It's how we were actually designed to be together. And it becomes much more easeful because we're not efforting trying to drive a coaching conversation. So,
well, so thanks, David.
Yeah.
And you know, I have, in spite of my training, I have never liked this whole focus on competencies, because I actually know quite a few, quote, master coaches that teach coaching, that supervise coaching competencies. And in my opinion, they're not good coaches. So
I have a similar experience. Yeah. Yeah. And I know many people have no training in coaching who I would be coached by in a nanosecond because of the maturity and wisdom of who they are.
Yeah. And I'll just throw in, I'm from Calgary.
You're from Calgary?
Calgary.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We did a fun narrative coaching event there for ICF a couple of years ago, right before the pandemic, I believe. It was quite fun. We had 90 people in a room for 50 people, and we had a bedlam, and it was wonderful. Olga, did you want to share something?
Yeah, just really quick.
Yes.
I'm online with you from Germany, from Frankfurt am Main today. And yeah, compared to what I've heard so far, I'm like really, really early in my career and just came in out of curiosity. I have a so-called systemic coaching Ausbildung training from the German institutions, and I have private experience as a coachee in a method that's closer to narrative coaching. So I was just curious to see what it is about now. I don't have loads of experience, but I use it partially in my main job and have some clients privately.
Great.
Yeah.
And I think, is it pronounced Fong? Did you want to share something? Did I say it correctly?
Yeah, my name's T.
Okay,
T.
T. Okay,
Yes.
T. All
Yeah,
right.
I'm from Vietnam. Vietnam. Yeah, currently I'm a freelance writer and a storyteller. I'm very interested in storytelling and coaching. I'm new to coaching, and I'm trying to find connections between story and the coaching, and I happen to find you on the website.
Okay.
So I have been reading your books, and it's really interesting. I'm not sure if any coach in Vietnam has been familiar with your method. I'm not sure. Maybe I am one of the first ones. Maybe I'm going to be the coach in the future. So I'm quite curious and interested in your method.
All right. Wonderful. All right. I think we got everybody. All right. So I'm just going to switch gears and just put up some things. This is being recorded, so you'll have access to the recording and the slides when we're all done, if that would be helpful to you. We've got the early bird pricing on for a couple of days, so you can save some money if you want to join us. So that's often a good thing. There we go. All right, so I'm just going to start here with this, and I'll let you just read this for a minute. No, I write this only because I've been teaching this work for over 20 years since I finished my PhD in this coaching. And it just feels like we're at an inflection point in the history of coaching. I've been in the coaching space for over 25 years. And for me, narrative coaching just represents a lot of where I see coaching going, which is freeing ourselves from some of the constructs that coaching began with and inviting our clients to do the same. Their issues now are often more complex, more complicated. They don't fit in little tiny boxes. And so I'm not really that interested in fads and trendy colors and fancy language. We don't use a lot of psychological language in our coaching. I've got 4 degrees, but I use that to engineer everything behind the scenes so that you can just be a human in front. And so I feel like it's really asking us to kind of get off the carousel and begin to run a bit freer in terms of how we imagine coaching to kind of meet where I sense most of our clients are now. One of the things another thing that's unique about our program is we spend the first about a quarter to a third of the program not talking about coaching, but talking about you. Because you're going to be your fundamental instrument in this work. And my observation over the years is we only can travel as far as we've gone ourselves. It doesn't mean we've had to have lived the same life or had the same exact experiences. But for example, if you grew up in a family or a context where grief was not acknowledged or talked about, and you've got a client who's just experienced a major loss in their family or a loss of their job, you're not going to be nearly as effective as somebody who's actually worked their own grief. And so we want to just help you kind of discover yourself as a coach and kind of figure out what you're bringing to coaching and what you'd like to bring more of to coaching. And there's a particular analogy in this photo. This actually is taken in the Sierra Nevada mountains of California. It's a place I hiked often when I was young. And I went back about 5 years ago to visit one of my favorite places. It's a place called Lake Italy. It's an extraordinarily beautiful alpine lake way up at the base of these giant mountains in that region. And so on my way up on this trail I'd been on many times, I started getting really confused and a bit lost, which is very rare for me. I couldn't figure out what was happening. And so I kind of tried to force my way to get to where I wanted to go. When I got there, I was even more confused because there was no lake. And this was a pretty significantly sized lake for that region. And I looked around and I realized that all of the glaciers on the mountains around the lake were gone because of climate change. So there was no more water for the lake. And there wasn't even a creek left. It was just a desert of sand and some bushes. And so I realized a couple of things as a metaphor for this. One is that I had been so attached to how things had been that I didn't pay attention to clues in my hike to suggest that the trail I was used to was no longer there. And that sometimes we force ourselves to fit into stories, fit into situations, as opposed to paying more attention to what's actually in front of us. The second thing was I did not make that mistake on the way down, and I sort of intuited from the map and my own sort of sense of the space a different way down. But this shot was taken when I camped after a very arduous day of hiking, and just reminded me again and again, even though we all have skills, we all have knowledge about coaching, like I did for hiking, but sometimes we get so attached to our maps and our memories that we lose track of what's happening. So a lot of our work is helping our clients to pay attention to themselves, and as well as to notice any of their maps which might be outdated. Okay, so here's 3. We've done this a bit. Again, if you've got, I'll leave the chat box open here so I can see that. If you got any chat questions, please just, this is at walking your dog, just put them in the chat box or just raise your hand and we can flag you down. But these are the 3 things I'd like to share about, and there'll be plenty of time at the end for you to ask more about the program. So what makes this work unique? Well, I always like to make things in contrast. So we're going to start here. So I enjoy this cartoon because, again, one of the ironies in training this work over the years is my most common piece of feedback to people is to invite them into the possibility that they might want to stop coaching and be quiet and pay attention to what's actually happening in front of them. Because oftentimes they're so eager to do a great job coaching that they've missed a lot of what's actually unfolding for the client. And so we end up sort of in this lifeguard stand, shouting at our clients in a way that's not really responding to the reality that they actually may be drowning. So I want to just give you, this is the simplest way I can talk about the distinction between how we often coach and how other coaches often coach. Nothing's 100%, but these are the two primary frames I see. So in the, let me just put this in the middle. So oftentimes when people come, they there's a lot of attention on themselves and on their methodology and trying to do well by their methodology, which is great. But the primary modality that a lot of coaches I see use is they're sort of been taught this idea that they have to have all kinds of powerful questions, and their primary job is to ask great questions, which, you know, it is an important skill, but I would argue it's not our primary job. So what happens when we ask questions is our clients think about our questions, and if they're good questions, they think a lot, which is a good thing for them, and then they answer our questions. And then we listen to their questions, but then we're often get caught up in our own formulations, our own stories about their stories, because we want to know where we are in our methodology, where, you know, how we're doing. And so we're using what we're hearing to drive our next question. And there's nothing inherently wrong with this. And I do this myself. It's just that if that's what your primary activity is as a coach, what happens over time is that you're listening faster so you can get to your next question. And meanwhile, the client may be going off this way, but your questions are going this way. And pretty soon you're completely in a different space than your client. So it's a bit of a caricature, but this is what I see often is an obsession with the need to ask questions, because the fear might be, if I don't ask questions, nothing will happen, which I would argue is not the case. So here's what we do instead. Our primary job is to witness the client so they can see themselves. What we do is we spend most of our attention on the field, the space between us, whether it's across a screen or in person, and the coaching relationship. How are we doing together? When we can witness them, we're asking them not to answer us, because our understanding may or may not even be necessary. It's to help them understand themselves. So we want to have them inquire into the moment itself. So what are you noticing about the words you just said in your story? What are you noticing about your experience having just told that story? And we're asking them to explore themselves. So when they share, they're sharing about their own lived experience in the moment, not our question we asked a few minutes ago. So then we're listening, but now our listening is to shape our observation. Like, what did we sense or feel or hear in ourselves or in the field or in the client that we might want to feed back to them? And we might say things like, I noticed when you talked about Fred in your story that your face kind of changed. You kind of went a little bit white or paler, and you seemed kind of distracted or maybe even a bit upset. Was that true for you? And oh yeah, I don't get along well with Fred, and I have a really hard time. I don't know how to relate to him on my team. Oh, okay. So what are you noticing about yourself as you share your discomfort about Fred? Yeah, it's been bothering me for a long time. I'm just realizing I haven't dealt with this. I've been putting this off. And so we're helping them to basically understand their own story, understand themselves as the storyteller, and understand the experience of telling the story, all of which is going to provide enormously rich information about what we might want to talk about in the session. So in our work, we tend to, as much as we can, only use the material in those people's stories, because we want to keep this in the here and now, and we largely want to keep the center of attention on the client and their story. So I'm going to stop here for a second, because I'm going to give you a chance to play with this for yourself in a minute, and just try it out so you can see what it feels like. But for now, I wanted to see if there's any thoughts or questions about these last couple of slides before we do that. Yeah, Jen.
You ever feel maybe feel the need or feel like it helps the conversation if you in some way prep the client for this type of interaction in advance, Or do you feel like just the experience itself is enough to draw them into it? Because I would imagine if someone's familiar with coaching, more traditional or different types of coaching in the past, they might come to the situation and feel a little maybe blindsided might be too strong of a word, but they might just feel like a little like, wait, what's happening here? And I wonder if that actually benefits if they're a little surprised or taken aback, like, I hadn't really thought about that. Let me think about that. Or do you think it helps to lay the groundwork in some way to say, you know, I don't know what that would be, how you might lay the groundwork, but I'm wondering what you think about that.
Generally, I don't preface it because it's really rare. I mean, there are some people who are surprised, like, I'm used to goals and steps and things to do, and they get a bit, maybe flustered in the beginning. But by and large, I think, my experience is most of my clients appreciate a more natural human conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want my clients to feel coached. I want them to feel like, wow, that was amazing. And so, yeah, if there are, in the course of winning work, sometimes, people always ask, what kind of coaching do you offer and how do you coach and what that might be like? And so there's often a natural opportunity to share more about this. But rather than try to explain narrative coaching, I just demonstrate that for them, like in a chemistry meeting.
Mm-hmm.
I model that for them. And one of the things, I've done this long enough now where I feel like I have my own bad days, but by and large, I live this work 24/7. It's who I am. It's how I parented. It's how, and so I don't have to explain it very much. And there's people for whom this might be too much, and that's fine. Then there's a gazillion coaches in the world. I don't take that personally, but I find I can get more done, which is important to some clients, in much less time, because I'm not spending a lot of my time coaching. I'm trying to understand, why are we here? What is the most essential thing for this conversation? And not that speed in itself is important, but we can get to important things sooner. Yeah. Other thoughts? Diego?
Yeah, I totally relate with Jen, because I'm being trained coach the client, not the story. So when I was doing some peak coaching with somebody from the same school, that I was trying a little bit of your techniques because I just read the book. I said, look, I felt a little bit uncomfortable talking about too much. But I said, look, that's the technique now. But I was wondering, do you also apply this for executive coaching? Because over there's a lot of input asked very often.
A lot of what?
Input, like very often input that are not coaching related is more like how would you handle this?
Assessments and 360s and things like that?
Or more on the strategic side, or asking advice.
Yes. So I use this for CEO. I've used this for everybody under the sun. What we forget is leaders are just human beings. I think sometimes we glorify them far too much. They have the same problems as all the rest of us, and often magnified. And we, again, I go back to, it doesn't matter how successful our session was. It matters what they can do. And if they have blind spots, or they have things that are maybe not easy for them to talk about at work, I want to create a safe space so they feel confident in themselves. And so, like, one of the reasons why, and this is really often very timely for a lot of executives, the thing that most adults crave more than anything around this work, around coaching, et cetera, and their own growth at work, is that it's a safe place to practice. I stopped doing leadership programs years ago because I said, again, we're creating these amazing experiences, but there's no place where they're going to feel safe enough to try most of this. There's too much risk. And so we don't set a lot of goals for later. I tell my clients, there's probably not very many people who care about you right now for this hour than I do. And if you can't do it here with me, you're not going to do it back in your job. It's too much pressure. And so we create a lot of new experiences and new experience for our clients, so they can find the part of themselves that would enable them to be successful at what they're trying to achieve. And And then we scaffold that up so they feel confident that they practice more. They might find a few people where they do feel safer at work to try it there first, and then kind of lean into the harder pieces that would help them to be successful. So, you have to be, they're obviously very mindful of strategic and economic issues at that level, but again, they're humans who are trying to do a job. And I can bring my more executive development and leadership development stuff in later, but I want to get them on board with what does this human need most right now from me. Any other thoughts or questions? Okay, so here's what I'd like to do. So I'm going to make this easy. I'm going to give you 4 questions. You do what you want, but this is just a way. These are the 4 phases of the narrative coaching model. And there's a 5th spiral because a lot of issues take more than one go. But when I used to do demonstrations, when I traveled more before the pandemic for academic coaching programs, I would often do demos for them just to show them this work. And it was quite baffling to some of them because we could do in 10 minutes what they would do in 2 hours. Because again, we're only interested in what's possible right now. So what I'm going to ask you to do, just get a feel for this, is I'm going to break you into pairs. We'll just give you about maybe 10 minutes. And I would like you just to, when you come into the session, maybe just do like 30 seconds of maybe slowing your breathing down, just settling, saying hello. And then I'd like one of you to be coached, and I'd like you just to present something that you're thinking about working on at this point in your life or your practice. And these are the 4 questions that I'd like you to ask if you're the coach. And these are the only 4 questions. So it's not, you may get an amazing outcome, you may not. That's not really the point. It's really, I want you to feel what it would be like to not have to worry, but oh my God, what am I supposed to say next? I want 100% of your energy to be focused on this other person because I've given you the questions, so you don't have to worry about any of that. And just see what happens by the nature of asking this style of questions. And so this is really just an experience for you, just to try something that might feel different. If there's a word for whatever reason that doesn't quite work for you, you're welcome to change this in any way you want. But I want to keep this as simple as we can. Are there any questions about the activity before I put you into some breakout rooms? Let's see, we can do this. Oh, perfect. All right, so I'll do that, create the rooms for you. We'll give you, when is it? We'll give you 10 minutes, let you just enjoy. All right, have fun. And if you want, you can take a screenshot of it before you go. Well, right. So I'll take the slides down for a minute. And I'm just really curious about your experience. What did you notice?
Big shift.
Someone was speaking. Oh, Diego.
Yeah, I had a wonderful experience. It was especially by the demeanor of the coach that helped me to really settle down. And that was something that I had to do, but when you had to settle down and you try to force to settle down, things get worse rather than better. So just sharing the story without looking for. I'm thinking if I had to go in a, let's call it classical coaching session, the answer, okay, what do you want to discuss about today? What do you want to achieve by the end of the session? How do you measure the result and what is important to you? And I would have go, okay, how do I know?
You don't. That's why I don't ask those questions.
Yeah, I mean, that's in theory the competency model. Huh?
Yeah. We get to those same places, but just we take a different and more enjoyable route. Yeah. So thank you. How about further, Jen? What was your experience like?
I can share.
Yes, Lisa.
Yeah. So from my perspective, it felt far more natural. Because to your point, I didn't have to think about, okay, what am I going to ask? Where are we going? And I could just be present, and it felt more like a conversation. And maybe this was because of the questions, maybe not, but I felt like a really deep heart connection. Yeah. So I didn't have to go here.
Yeah.
I could go here.
Yeah. And this will always be here. It's more I hold it in reserve. And because there's times, like, frankly, where you have a piece of information or life experience that you might want to share briefly with the client because it's going to be really reassuring to them or helpful to them. There might be a book that they think, oh, this would be really helpful to them. But we're sort of holding that back here in reserve if it comes to pass as being necessary. But oftentimes, again, people are trying to, as part of their experience that they're wrestling with, they're sometimes struggling with themselves, maybe in confidence or awareness or something. And so we're trying to help them kind of come back to themselves. And so they have a better foundation for whatever it is they want to try to achieve as a result of working with you. Anyone else want to share? Robin.
Yeah, I was being coached.
And
I must say, I felt totally relaxed. And I was very disappointed when we were suddenly pulled out of the session.
Okay.
Because I feel wrong.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, I have to find the person on LinkedIn and continue your conversation if you'd like. Yeah. All right. Okay. Again, you're welcome to use the chat box as we go if there's more things that come up. So let me just go back to this.
This is Ross, and I'll just say,
yes, Ross.
In the coach role, it was pretty relaxed, I have to say, for me as a coach. And that's because I didn't believe I needed to get anywhere.
Yeah, very much so. And what you'll start to find is that when I used to do these demonstrations, people would say, like, they're very, very confused because they'd say, you're just sitting there, and yet the client seems to be having a great experience. Like, how is that even possible? Because they're just used to, like, coaches doing stuff. And I said, I'm not being paid to do stuff. I'm being paid to create experiences for the client that they find valuable. And when you try to get somewhere, I often find it less productive. Yeah. And then ironically, you get there anyways. All right, so let me just share where we're at here. See if I can get this. There we go. All right. So there we were.
Can I interrupt, please, David? Sorry.
Of course. I have to find, is that Ross again?
Yeah.
Okay. Match voice.
I would like to hear from more people about their experience, at least of being coached, but it just feels like a whole bunch of people had an experience. I didn't get to hear about it, and I'd like to, if it's not throwing off the program.
Oh, well, there's no program. There's just a bunch of slides and me. So we're making the program up as we go. So yeah, so anyone want to take up Ross's invitation to share more about their experience, particularly as a recipient?
I was with Alyssa, and what a
Yeah.
natural coach she was.
Huh.
And we had a lovely conversation at the beginning, because all of a sudden my dogs started barking. They've been really quiet all the way through. So we had a lovely conversation about dogs, and then it just eased very, very naturally into our experiences of coach training. And then we got on to my role within a university, and Alyssa very naturally brought us back to those questions that you had on the slide. Conversation flowed, and it felt like a very nurturing conversation. And I think that's important to me, that it doesn't feel like anything other than a nurturing conversation.
Thank you.
I could say a couple of words to that.
Yes, hold on.
I was coached as well, and to me, I think I was seeking structure more than I expected, so it was hard to kind of dive in with this free space of what are you noticing? Yeah, what am I noticing? Where? What's the topic? Where are we going to? But the way it worked was that in the end, Chris managed to like lead with more questions that were coming from him and not just from the list. And it did bring me to some thought-provoking ideas, which I have written down, and I might think about that.
Okay, good for you. Yeah, part of the model is built around a structure of a rite of passage. And because in my research, I sort of noted that there was a really strong parallel between there's a 4-act structure for a story, because the client comes in with one story about the situation or about themselves or about somebody else. And if the coaching is effective, they often leave with a different one. So we can kind of follow the arc of the story as it's changing. It sort of maps with the 4 phases of transitions that are mapped on a rite of passage, which has both an outer and inner dimension, because again, they're not the same person when they leave if it's gone well. And so the structure is really just in terms of the structure of their story and helping them kind of notice where are you on that change journey in your story, what you need now that would enable you to take the next step. All right. Okay. I'm going to move on. And again, if there's more you want to ask or share, just please pop in. So I love this particular picture. If I were this woman's coach, first thing I'd have her do is put on more sensible boulder carrying shoes. But it often feels like that when we're coming to coaching, especially we've been at this well, we're just bringing all this stuff. Our clients are bringing a whole dump truck full of big rocks that they sort of pour out into the session. And for me, when I started coaching, especially right after my PhD, I was very much like this woman in terms of all the things I thought I needed to bring to coaching and remember and use. And I realized, and over the years, I just kept shedding more and more and more to now I hardly say anything in coaching. And I use as few, in some ways, as not quite as few words as possible, but I try to speak what I call in plain language. But I want, what we find is that oftentimes people start a program feeling like this woman on the left, and they end up feeling more like this person on the right when they leave. More freedom, more agility, more ability to move to where the client is. And maybe there's a little fanny pack, maybe in the front of her bike, if you look closely at the picture, that has a few essentials, but otherwise this person's good to go. So that's what we're trying to kind of enable people to do that. And so to help ourselves with that, one of the analogies we often use is we see ourselves as tugboats. We're not, we're just one small factor in our client's life. or workplace. We see them only for a little bit of time in that week. And what we're really good at is understanding where to push on the boat. So we're just kind of coming alongside. Where's this boat trying to go? And what nudges from me or inquiries from me or reflections from me might kind of help it shape itself to discover where it really wants to go and how to get there safely. But this change journey they're on was underway before they started coaching with us. It's going to be underway after they left coaching with us. And so we're asking, what is our role right now with this big boat? So if you've ever looked at the book or anything, these are the 6 principles of narrative coaching. We keep coming back to these again and again. If you remember only one of them, remember the first one. It's the most important one in some ways, and it's the one around all the rest of them are built. So we have a fundamental trust that everything we need is right in front of us in coaching. Doesn't mean that we can't bring things into the session, but most of our focus is on what's happening right in front of us. And if, as with all of us, there's times in coaching where we drift, our mind wanders, we forget what the client was saying. It just happens. We're human. And so we just come back to this principle. Okay, I'm just going to come back and notice what's here right now. Oh, they're talking about X. Oh, I can just ask them something about X. And then, oh yeah, that's what we're talking about. And you're back in the loop again. And so even if a client's talking about the past or the future, we generally bring it into the present moment so they have the experience of it, not just talking in their head about it. We do our very best to show up and situate, not trying to do anything other than welcome the human being, be present to them with what is, and have no judgments about that whatsoever. So we're accepting, but not attached. So a lot of our, Chris is joining us. A lot of our role in many ways is helping our clients be more honest with themselves about what is. Oftentimes clients are maybe uneasy or uncertain or unsettled, and they want to escape to what can I do about this? Or how can I fix this now? Or how can I make this go away? Without ever really understanding what is that they're dealing with. So we spend a lot of time in that. And then lastly, sort of borrowing and riffing on the late great Ram Dass, we only speak when we can improve on science. And my experience over the years is that's not as often as we think. And the second set of 3 is in working with clients, we tend to focus on generating experiences, not explanations. So we don't have a lot of discussions. We don't bring in a lot of fancy terms. We want to create vivid lived experiences. So for example, you might have a client that maybe is promoted to their first management or leadership role. They're kind of used to being a subject matter expert, and now they've got to manage people and do things they're not as comfortable with yet. And so they're already starting to recognize that one of the things they find challenging is confronting somebody about underperformance or making a strong request of somebody. And so we're not going to set a goal about that. We're going to do that right now. So I would invite them. So is there anything about my coaching you that you'd like to improve or you would like me to do differently? Well, I don't know. And then their old behavior kicks in. And so I might say, maybe just look at me, or maybe I'll get them to stand on a chair, or maybe I'll get them to change their voice. To begin to create this, to recognize that there's going to be parts of themselves that they might need to access in ways they did not before to generate the outcome they're seeking. So I want to create a sense of giving them a felt experience of the range, the possibilities, hearing themselves be somebody else, and play with it. So we do a lot of almost improvisational activities in narrative coaching to work with the stories and the story material to help them have experiences they don't feel safe having anywhere else. And in that, like I said, we work directly with the narrative elements in the field. So we're going to show you a lot about how to use characters, objects, chairs to help bring the story into 3 or more dimensions so they can actually experience it, not just talk about it. And so again, as much as possible, we work with the narrative elements only. And then lastly, again, one of the things that people struggle with is, which is especially if they're sort of asked to go do big things after a session without any practice, is this sort of threshold, like I was this person, but now I can see I really need to step into this new part of myself or this new role, or I need to make this choice to quit and get a different job. Well, these are big moments for people, and especially when they're starting to recognize they're becoming a different person. Their story's changing. They're going to let go of the old story. So we need to be able to stand there with them. If we're uncomfortable with strong emotions, if we're uncomfortable with saying clear, loving things, then we're not going to be very effective in this space, because we're not going to be able to show up in ways that our clients will find helpful. So the good news is we're going to help you get much, much better at this, if that's something you want to work on, so you can actually stand there with clients when they're trying to make big choices. So just 2 more slides. So again, silence is incredibly important in narrative coaching, to leave space for the conversation to breathe, for the clients to find themselves, to hear themselves, to feel themselves. And so silence is not the absence of talking. Silence is the very ground from which we work. And I find it just creates so much more room for the old stories that are trying to be let go of, to be relaxed and released, and a quiet space in which new stories can be born. And so what we'll find is that that our talking is important, but it becomes much more focused when we think about we're talking after we're silent, not staying silent after we're talking. We do that too, but our primary focus is to be with the silence and see what it's trying to tell us and what it's trying to make possible. Which is why we focus more on listening and witnessing as our first act. And here's the last slide I want to share with you, and then I'll see what questions you might have. So this is a sort of a significant adaptation of something Albert Schweitzer once said. So again, we're trying to activate the healer that's already in the person, because that's the resource they're going to draw on when they're not with us. And so we spend a lot of time helping them to find themselves, to resource themselves, so they feel more able to do what they need to do after they've left the session. We come here not as experts, as perfect. We're wounded healers just like they are. And so we're meeting as 2 humans. One of the things I find quite powerful in coaching is, and we'll get this in the program, they're called moments of meetings from attachment theory, but it's the ability for both parties in the coaching session to recognize the relationship or the way we're working before now has been interrupted by something that's happened in the conversation, and both of us are going to have to rise to a new level. So it's our willingness to be changed and transformed by the session, which is actually one of the greatest drivers of your own evolution as a coach. And so, when a client maybe breaks down and weeps or yells at you, or presents an issue you've never dealt with before, or is really not liking what's happening, and like, okay, so game on. We've got to figure out what needs to be activated in each of us to help us rise into this new level. And so I find it keeps coaching more dynamic. It keeps me more humble, and allows us to model for our client what they're wanting to do for themselves. So we're going to move in just a minute. I'm going to share some more about the program itself, but I wanted to stop and see if anything's come up for you in these last few slides you'd like to ask about in terms of what this might mean for your practice. Let's stop this so I can see you all. Oh, and Chris, welcome.
Thank you. I think I got the time wrong. So
you did, but that's okay. You're here now, and this will be recorded, so you can you'll get a link to the recording in a follow-up email, so you can watch the part you missed.
Oh, wonderful! Thank you very much.
You're welcome. All good. Okay.
So David, was there somebody else doing this work before you started figuring this out?
No.
Or...
I mean, it's in coaching, no. It has some similarities to the work of the late Michael White, who started narrative therapy. So like one of the big things that I learned a lot from his work was the value of externalization. It's often easier for people to confront things that are challenging about themselves if they see it first outside themselves, because then it's less defended and they can look at it more fully. No, I finished my PhD in 2002 and first did some presentations actually at narrative conferences. And then I did my first public presentation at the University of Sydney in Australia in 2005. And I realized pretty quickly that that day was going to change my entire life. I felt it when I walked into the room and even before anything started, and it did. And when I did my first public demonstration of narrative coaching for a large ICF gathering in Sydney a couple of months later, I'd never shown the work in public before. I only did it in my practice. And the greatest gift of that whole session in many ways was, as part of the feature of the program, they had an MCC or whatever, one of their upper level certified coaches do a demonstration. They had that every meeting. And so there's somebody came on right after me. And so I was curious. I said, what do other coaches do? And so I watched her, and it was a huge gift for me because I said to myself, I don't do anything of what that woman just did. And it really helped me put in relief. I mean, she was really good at that style of coaching, but I found it very extroverted, very almost demanding, very upbeat and positive, and sort of a Tony Robbins kind of style of coaching that I just found really didn't work for me. But I'm forever grateful for her, because I don't think I fully appreciated how unique what I had was until I saw her. And I thought, okay, that gave me the confidence to move on and say, I'm going to offer people something completely different. My first career was as a grief counselor, and I learned a lot about books about change and grief and actual grief of lived people and lived experiences. And I found, I like to think of myself as an enlightened pragmatist. I do this work from, I think, a fairly enlightened place. I've worked hard at that. But I'm also pragmatic. I do it because it works, not because I enjoy it as much as I just find it more effective for more people, because we're getting more to the root of issues, not talking about symptoms. Are there other questions or thoughts at this point? Otherwise, I'll shift gears and talk about the program itself. Okay. All right. Here we are. Okay. So there are 9 modules in the program. It's one approximately every month. We have a little gap in the middle, give everyone a break. Every module has the same structure. This will be the last year we teach it in this structure. We're moving to a more self-directed model in 2025, so I can have more time to write books. We have wonderful faculty who've been working with me for quite a while, and they will help out with parts of this. But the first session will be with me, and it will be the sort of the core material for that module to make sure everybody's oriented and ready to go. And then we're again, we use our own work to design our program. So rather than doing more teaching, we actually send you out in the field with 2 assignments, which you can do as they're assigned. You can adapt them, you can ditch them and do something else. It's your journey. But these ones, is what we call a stretch assignment, which is a reflective experience for yourself of something related to that module. So you can feel what we talked about the first week for yourself and do some work on yourself. And then the field assignment is actually going out to do something, just to try something out. Give yourself permission to play and try something new based on what we talked about the first week. Now you've got some beginnings of anchors in yourself for the content from the first week. In the third session, we'll come back from the faculty, and they're going to help you kind of process what you've been discovering in your assignments, what you're noticing about the material from that module, what of that you tried in your own coaching sessions. I used to do these sessions, but I found in many ways that the faculty was better than I was in some ways. I've done this for so long, it's now ingrained in me. So I've forgotten what it's like to not know this work. And so the kinds of questions that our participants tend to ask are ones that the faculty are much closer to because they were there a few years ago themselves. And it's just kind of fun to get some different voices and perspectives on narrative coaching so you can find your own way through this. And then we'll join you up with people in your relative time zone into a small group, usually around 4 people, and give you a chance to kind of integrate through some assignments there well. One thing I'll say that is new this year, that you'll be the first cohort next year to experience it in the program if you join us. So we've partnered with a company that's built this extraordinary platform to help you record sessions and get feedback on them from both live people and a bit of algorithms that's now increasingly modeled around me. So it'll be increasingly feedback I would have given you if I were there. This isn't, so I worked with them as their learning development advisor to help them shape the platform. There's a lot of narrative coaching and my other work in integrative development that are now being built into the platform to help people take advantage of the feedback. We've had 2 pilot runs. The people have loved it because they get immediate feedback. They can watch themselves. There's a transcript that they can match to the video, like, like, look at all that talking I did as the coach. They can go back to the video and look at it and say, what led me to talk so much? Oh, that really triggered me when they said that as the client, and I kind of got lost in myself and just stopped coaching in many ways. So that's going to be available to you to do those practices if you choose. If you don't, you want to do it over Zoom or whatever, you're welcome to do that as well. But I want to just make that available to you so that you get some more support for what you're trying to integrate from that module. So the first 3 modules are really about you. We'll introduce the narrative coaching process at the end of module 3. But it's really about who you are, how you are with clients, how you relate to clients, how you might think about relating to clients more fully, and sort of kind of getting you grounded in the mindset of narrative coaching. And for some people, there's a whole bunch of stuff they leave at the door from things that they realize they don't want or need anymore in their coaching, and then other parts they want to bring with them into the narrative coaching space. Our second 3 modules are all about the narrative coaching process itself. And we bring a little bit of our ID work into this one to help you focus more on how to help accelerate the learning and growth for your clients through coaching. And then the last 3 modules are about some very specific skills, like how do we think about inquiry from a narrative perspective? How do we listen differently than we might otherwise to our clients' stories? And then scaffolding, how do we help our clients achieve what's important to them from the coaching session? And then we have a wonderful celebration at the very end. So everything that you get, all of these things in the program. Again, we find people move in and out of what's available to them based on their learning preferences, based on their time, their schedule. But all these things are here for you. And I think that's about it. And then, so this is part of a larger ecosystem we're building out. So we have these practice groups on the platform. If you want to, after you graduate, it's a great place to come keep practicing. We're completely rebuilding a certification program, which will launch next year, as well as some specialized classes going deeper on some of the topics people have wanted to ask more about. And then we're building in ways for you to connect to other narrative coaches around the world, of which there are thousands of them. So, all right, I think that's about it. And so that's just a basic quick overview of the program. We find that people on average spend about 10 hours a month on the program. Give them a chance to read. We've got a really wonderful, we switched platforms this year to create a better forum experience for people. So that's where all your materials will be for class. That's where you can talk to each other about what's happening and reflect on each other. And we had a number of people with some really difficult life experiences this year in the program. And it was extraordinary to watch the group bond around them and really support them through the program. And many of you will come because of me, but you'll stay for each other. You will form often, if you want that, really significant relationships with colleagues. People are very supportive and caring, I find, in our community. And yeah, so just want to see if there's any questions about the details of the program that might be helpful for you. And I'll put this up while you're thinking. So for the next couple of days, you can save $200 if that's important to you. You can just put in this web address. If I could take this off of share screen, I can do this for you. And I can just put this in the chat box for us. Here we go. And they'll take you to a place where you can get the discount. That's important. So act on that if you'd like. But for now, I'm going to just take the share screen down and see if you have any questions about the program or anything that was on your mind that you arrived that we didn't touch on that would be important to you.
David, can I ask about the kind of assignments people take on?
They're very so that like the stretch assignments are very simple. Like one of the early assignments, if you're familiar with yoga or anything where they use sort of the chakra system, sort of energy centers of our body. So one of the things we're doing as we're developing you as a narrative coach is building on all the other things you've done in your life and your career to know yourself. Like, how do you know what you know, and how do you sense what's happening for the client? And so we do an activity to help you access different levels of your own body, just to see where you tend to prioritize your sensing, where you might be missing some things, because then you're also going to then be invited to do that with your clients. So if you're asking somebody to notice, like, what do you notice about what you just said? And some of our clients really struggle. I don't know. I don't really notice myself. Oh, well, we might want to begin there to increase that capacity. And so we get them sometimes to put their hand on their heart, like, tell me about something in your life that was really moving for you. And they might tell about a funeral of somebody they cared about, or their day when their son graduated from college or something. Do you notice anything different about that space in your body when you oh yeah, it's really warm now? No, that's called awareness of self. And so they're often, the stretch assignments are very often very experiential. They're very much only about you and your own journey. The field assignments are around sort of micro skills that would be really helpful. And so like maybe you find yourself not very courageous in trying new things in coaching. Maybe you try to play it safe, or you don't want to seem serious, or so one of our years ago when I was with my partner, we were on a trip to visit my mother. My stepfather had passed away. We're on our way to the funeral. It's early morning. She had been in the class, and she just happened that week's assignment was what I'm about to tell you, which was to try something you wouldn't otherwise try in public, to have some fun, to stretch yourself. And so we stopped at a Starbucks to get coffee. It's like 6 o'clock in the morning. Everybody's tired, grumpy. Line's too long. They're short-staffed, and people are getting really restless and kind of grumpy with the clerks. And so I turned to my partner and I said to her, we need to do something here. And she goes, oh yeah. And so I said, it's your assignment this week. What would you like to do? I think we should get them to sing. And so we basically we started this conversation with these two African-American women who were behind the counter, and they said, do you like music? And these are the questions coming from my partner. Yeah, what kind of music do you like? I love gospel music. What's your favorite gospel song? And she told us, and she goes, how are you feeling right now? Totally stressed. We're down 2 people, and those people are being mean to us. I said, I think you should sing. And so the two of them just broke out in this extraordinarily beautiful rendition of a very famous gospel song for about 1 minute. The complete tone. Even the homeless guy sleeping in the corner woke up. He was so moved by this. And then we got everybody to kind of chill out and be more patient and be more kind. And it made these 2 women's day. So this was my best day of work ever. And so for my partner, it was really like not something that she would normally do to like step out of her comfort zone in public to try to change the dynamic. But it made 12 people's lives better for one day. So their field assignments are often small little experiments to see where you can stretch yourself into things that would allow you to build up more confidence to do this when you're actually in coaching, and maybe you feel more pressure. And the pod assignments are really practicing usually one of the skills from that particular module. And yeah. Does that help?
Really good. Excellent. Experimenting with different ways of being.
Exactly.
With respect to that. Yeah.
Yeah, you bet. Anything else that would be helpful for you right now?
How does the enrollment work, and when is the deadline?
So technically the deadline's tomorrow, but we're going to extend it a couple of days. So by Thursday, let's see, Thursday or Friday, you get the discount. Otherwise, the enrollment I think runs through January. So you can, but if you want to save some money, I would do it now.
No, it's not. I mean, it's not.
And then if you just go to that link,
it's more a black and white kind of situation for me. It's not the $200. I need to have some income from other sources in order to follow the program altogether. So it's not the $200. Okay.
Okay,
it's more,
fair enough.
Okay.
You can. We offer it in monthly payments if that's helpful as well. So we break it into 9 pieces if that helps. Yeah, if you want, you can just put your name on the list, and then when you feel you're ready, you can just sign up.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
People
Thank you, Lawrence.
in one of these sessions.
What's that, Ross?
How many people typically? How many people are you expecting to get into the next?
I think like everybody. I think like everybody else, people. We're noticing that people are feeling kind of a bit. They're back at work and things are crazy, and so I expect a slightly smaller group this year. We normally get about 50. I'm suspecting we'll probably get closer to 30 or 35, which is great because then we get just more time to talk to each other, and that would be my guess.
And then is there I would appreciate being able to speak to another executive coach that is a coach that's worked primarily with corporate leaders who has been through this experience.
Okay. What I can do, Ross, if you would
I'll get in touch with you about that.
Yeah, and Allison was one of our 2 faculty. Well, actually, both of them, both Vicky and Allison, our faculty have done it. That's what they do for a living.
Well, I know Allison, but I was looking for somebody sort of
as one of the participants.
Different than your instructors.
Okay, fair enough. Well, I'll just send me a note and I'll think about somebody. Okay.
Thank you.
Great. All right. Well, if you feel complete, maybe we're done for the day. Yeah.
Good.
Thank you for your time. And if you need anything else, just reach out and let us know. Otherwise, we hope that you'll come and join us next year.
Thank you, David.
Thank you. Be well.
Thank you.
Thank
Everyone.
you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Lawrence. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks, Diego.
Thank you.
Bye. There you go.